people, but the cure. It's a curse.
Michael.
I have powers that can only be described as superhuman. But there's a cost. Now, I face a choice. To hunt and consume blood. Or die.
We all have monsters within us. It's up to us to control it.
What if I can't?
Michael Morbius. You've been given a gift.
Not exactly.
Time to let go of what you used to be.
Discover who you're meant to be.
All our lives we've lived with death. Why shouldn't that be what it feels like?
It's Trinidad, the Island Man, your Island Man, coming to you live once again from beautiful Hawaii here on the island of Oahu, bringing you, yes you, the best movie reviews on the entire island of Oahu. And yes, this is Trinidad, the Island Man, your Island Man. And today, just a few hours ago, over at the movie theater, I went ahead and I saw the new Sony Spider-Man verse movie called Morbius. And, well, without further ado, remember our rating scale. Shock a thumbs up. It's good to see. I recommend it. Shock a thumbs down. It's junk. I don't recommend it. And for Morbius, it is overall a shock a thumbs up. Now, this stars Jared Leto, Oscar-winning actor Jared Leto, Matt Smith from famed Doctor Who, and I guess The Crown. I don't know. I don't watch that stuff. But Doctor Who, man, he was one of the best Doctor Who's ever. I think he's even better than David Tennant. Now, I know new Who fans might come at me for that, but I say, bring it on, bro. I'm ready. Yeah, you know, I think his tenure as the Doctor was far superior to any of the new Doctors, and even he himself has regretted leaving that role. However, finally, after so long, he has a decent movie part, one that has not been cut out of the movie or shortened, is actually a co-starring lead in the film. And, you know, I, for one, thank Sony for that. And he definitely does a great job doing that, being in this film, and holds his own with and against Jared Leto, Oscar award-winning Jared Leto. So, you know, they made the right call putting Matt Smith in there in the movie. Jared Harris also is in this movie, kind of a mentor to Dr. Michael Morbius. And I want to say newcomer, but I think she's been in some other stuff. I think she's in that Ambulance movie coming out by Michael Bay. Adrena Arjonas is also in this movie. She's another doctor working with Dr. Michael Morbius and becomes a love interest. You know, no big surprise seeing that she's the only female star in the movie. They're not that woke over at Sony yet. All right, so what can I say about this movie other than it is a shock a thumbs up? I highly recommend this movie. I was a little worried, honestly, going in to see this movie, having not seen any reviews, but having people talk about it and just through word of mouth saying that there was a problem or an issue with like some of the end credit scenes and just something about it not being a good movie. But you know, after seeing it, wipe all that away. You know, I'm a Spider-Man fan, so I know Spider-Man. I remember Morbius from the comic books. And this is a pretty good portrayal of him. Definitely more along the lines as the new Venom films. He's kind of an anti-hero more than a villain per se. But they're trying to keep him, you know, in the shadowy realm of possible villain in the future against Spider-Man. Possibly. We'll see. I don't know what Sony's doing, but overall, for this movie, it is very, very good. Jared Leto carries his weight in gold for this movie. He really makes a compelling and compassionate portrayal of a man, who has grown up with a blood crippling affliction, a blood disorder that not only he suffers from, but his best friend and, a lot of people throughout the world. And he has searched for a cure ever since. And finally, thanks to some breakthrough research, genetic research, splicing of DNA using vampire bats, he seems to have found the answer, the solution. Unfortunately, as the trailers would suggest, well, not really suggest, as they show you, his metamorphosis into what would seem to be a full-fledged vampire. So his cure becomes much more of a curse than a cure, and thus, with these debilitating effects, he, of course, cannot share this cure or solution for this blood disorder with the populace, being that it is so destructive, basically. He has a thirst for human blood almost every day, sometimes even sooner. Now, due to his work as a scientist, he had developed previously, one of his claims to fame was a synthetic blood, and that can sustain him for a limited amount of time. However, it seems that he builds a resistance to that. So that is not a cure-all, end-all of it. Now, I've seen a lot of vampire movies. I'm sure you've seen a lot of vampire movies. Hey, if you can have the strength and immortality of a vampire, a real vampire, mythic kind of vampire, then, hey, go rob yourself some blood banks or whatever. You don't have to kill anybody. Even, classic vampires have the option of, feeding on animals. So, it's just, a la the Twilight movies. So, you don't have to go down that route of, I'm killing everybody that I meet kind of a thing. Unless you really want to, maybe just a few people here and there. Only the ones you don't like, I guess. But in this one, due to his blood affliction, and as it's spelled out very quickly in the movie, animals are not an option for him. Apparently it has to be human blood for Morbius, and thus he is even more afflicted. And being a person who's supposed to save lives and not take lives as a medical doctor, medical professional, this is even more morally troubling and concerning to him. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit of spoilers here, so spoilers at this point. Whereas his friend Matt Smith, also his benefactor, having been a rich philanthropist, using his money to back a cure, having the same disease as Dr. Michael Morbius, Jared Leto's character, wishes a cure as much as Jared Leto's character Morbius does. Uses his financial strength to back him and his studies. He finds out about the serum that Michael Morbius took, and although his friend denies him the serum, he steals it from him and takes it, and thus becomes a living vampire as well, and begins to blame, cause all these deaths, because he doesn't care about, killing other people, being a rich, I guess a rich 1%er. He doesn't care about humanity. He just cares about himself. So why shouldn't he just munch on people whenever and whoever he feels is in the way? He goes for it. So, no moral problems with him being a vampire or a living vampire. That is a distinction. This is a living vampire scenario. No, holy water won't work. Crucifixes, The classic vampire weaknesses do not work on them because they're more of akin to vampire bats is where they get their powers from. They can glide, they have kind of a radar sense, increased strength and endurance, etc. And of course survivability, although I don't see how that comes into for bats normally, or quick healing, but the Sony does cross the line more so than the comic books originally ever did with the Morbius Spider-Man villain character into full-fledged vampire powers without the significant weaknesses other than a desire for blood, a need for blood. As we see, it's not just a psychological need for blood, it's physiological. He has to have this or else, they will die. And so that's the difference between a real vampire and this Morbius and offshoots of him. Now, I did say that there are some discrepancies between the comics and this movie that Sony has taken, a lot of liberties with. Again, mainly in the fact that he does seem to have more vampire supernatural powers, almost a teleportation, kind of a turn to mist. There's, so you could, maybe it's his super speed, but there seems to be like almost he can turn to smoke at times. But I think that's just the speed effect associated with him. But at times he does seem to disappear. Although, again, that could just be his increased speed, faster than maybe the normal eye can catch. That could be the rationale behind that. But it does awfully look like a, turn to smoke kind of classic vampire power. Also, at the end, another spoiler, unfortunately. So you might want to turn the sound off for this one. His love interest, is killed by Matt Smith. Drina Arjonas is killed by Matt Smith. But in her dying wish to defeat Matt Smith, Jared Leto consumes her blood. And in doing so, she kind of takes in some of his blood. And apparently there's an end credit scene where she seems to come back from the dead like a vampire. That is outside of the realm of the comic books of the living vampire Morbius mythos, and much more along the lines of a quote-unquote real vampire, a supernatural vampire. So, Sony does take a lot of liberties there, and she may show up in, in a sequel movie. Now, but other than that, this movie really holds together very well. It does give a dramatic, heartfelt performance by Jared Leto of a man troubled with his own mortality and trying to find a way to extend, and not only out of greed for himself, but to help others, which is a good spotlight that they focus. That it's like, hey, it's not just me, it's everybody else afflicted with this disorder in the world, this blood disease, that I'm trying to save. So, and of course, he can't put anybody at risk, so he puts himself at risk testing this serum. And so it holds together well. You really feel his compassion towards others. And his struggle to resist this urge to kill and consume human blood throughout the movie, while having to deal with someone, his best friend in fact, that does not seem to share his same compulsions, and convictions for, human life. So again, strong shaka thumbs up for this movie. What I feel a lot of the criticism is about why people don't like this movie is that, like this last Batman movie, it's hard to fit. Where does this fit in the MCU? And it's a little easier than the Batman, saying that, well, you know, this is Sony Marvel, not MCU Disney Marvel. So you always have to take that with a grain of salt. Morbius, Venom, you know, isn't going to run into the Avengers, even though, Spider-Man was on the Avengers, even though Vulture, Michael Keaton was running around, in the Avengers world, fought, oh gosh, what's his name? Happy Hogan, I guess, or something like that. It stole from Stark Technology. He is not really a part of the MCU because Sony owns the Spider-Man characters and all of the villains. So they will always stand alone from MCU. And since with No Way Home out, and having seemingly been the last Tom Holland Spider-Man movie to this date, as far as I know, no contract has been signed or renewed for him to continue as Spider-Man with Sony, and he can't with Marvel alone, Marvel, MCU, Disney, because Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man. And the way No Way Home ends, with everybody forgetting about Spider-Man in the Disney Marvel universe, it makes it perfectly well suited that Sony can just go ahead with their own Spider-Man movies, a Sinister Six movie, which is where you see some of those trailers. And another spoiler, at the end credit scenes, you see Toomes, the Vulture, Michael Keaton's character come into, they actually, this feels like a tacked on ending to this movie that was not originally filmed. That they throw him in. He's no longer, the Doctor Strange magic sucked him into the Venom, Morbius universe out of the Spider-Man universe, and he is aware of this. So he's no longer, in the same universe as the Avengers, Captain America, Iron Man, etc. He is now just with the Venom universe in this Spider Sony universe. And he meets Morbius at the end and says, hey, we should team up with some other people. Namely, most likely, Scorpion, maybe a new Dr. Octopus, obviously Venom, maybe. We'll see what happens to fight maybe Spider-Man. They mentioned Spider-Man specifically in this universe, although there had been no mention of Spider-Man before. So, what Spider-Man are they referring to? We don't know. This is all things Sony bubbled up this confusion at the end and tacked it on to this movie, this otherwise good, really solid movie, and just muddled the waters right here, right now with, hey, this is a different universe. This is the standalone Spider-Man universe. No more Disney Marvel stuff with these guys, not even the Vulture, let alone Spider-Man. So that's the confusion, and it does feel tacked on, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, and that's what I think a lot of people are having problems with for this Morbius movie. But as a whole, the movie stands on its own. Just don't watch the end credit scene with Michael Keaton, and you'll be far happier with that, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And again, it's just a cash grab, I think, by Sony to say, okay, we're taking our toys and going home to our own universe of the Spider-Verse with our own Sinister Six, including Michael Keaton's Vulture, now Morbius, now Venom, and whoever else, probably Craven coming in later as there's working on that movie as well. All right, but again, overall for Morbius as a standalone Spider-Verse Sony film, outside of Disney and Marvel, it is a shock a thumbs up, and they do a really good job. And in fact, I go as far to say that Sony has stolen some of Marvel Disney's wind out of its sails for the new Blade movie, having introduced Morbius, the living vampire, as well as they have done so with the great actor Jared Leto. I think a lot of the steam, the force that was originally felt with the announcement of, Kevin Feige's new Blade movie is kind of undercut by this Morbius movie because it is so well. All right. Thank you so much. Mahalo. This is Trinidad, the Island Man, your Island Man, giving Morbius, the living vampire, a shock a thumbs up all the way. Check it out, however, whenever you can. All right. Aloha.